Oseo.
Oseo.
Cherokee greeting, and Buenos tardes.
Buenas
That's the
tardes.
Spanish greeting, and Viva Mexico. That's
Viva
the Mexican
Mexico.
greeting. Yeah, celebrating Cinco de Mayo. That was Friday. And Cinco de Mayo was an occasion where the Mexicans, just Mexicans, they defeated Napoleon's French army at Puebla. Well, that was something because that, regular trained European army, they were able to rout them like that. And the first president of the Republic of Mexico, Bueno Juarez, is Zapotec, it's indigenous like that. And against all these attempts of other powers to take over Mexico, Mexico has held its own. Still, the United States, try to grab, and all that. So, Viva Mexico. My interest actually was spawned by an Aztec spirit, an apparition to me, and that launched it in every way, opened me, for Mexico. And the college I was in had a satellite campus there, and the timing was just right. So I was a graduate student, and so all my graduate studies. My the whole thing was Mexican art history, but my main principle in the painting aspect was Diego Rivera, like that. And then then the literature part, the literary part of my studies there was Octavio Paz. And I started with the Labyrinth of Solitude. After I finished with my master's degree, I went on and gave a lot of lectures at public schools and so forth, especially up in Northern California, where the authorities were having trouble with the Mexican grape strikers. And so they invented Chicano studies, and I had occasion to give talks, show slides that I had all collected during my studies in Mexico. So I'm going on with Octavio Paz, and on this occasion celebrating Cinco de Mayo. And so I've done a lot with Octavio Paz, his various books, and this one is Eagle or Sun is his book, and I'm just going to start right off and read this piece. Here, my painting here, I've named, Cabeza de Ángel, the head of the angel, which is the title of Octavio Paz's poem, and so that's why I have all of this here. This is my piece, and you can see it all here in his piece. Far off, there was a landscape with a sky where there were 1 million flying birds and some hunters, and a bird was falling, shot by an arrow, and you could see the white feathers fall and the red drops, and no one pitied it. And I began to cry for the little bird, and then the Moors cut off my head with a white scimitar, and a jet of blood burst from my neck and spilled on the ground like a red waterfall. And from the ground 1 million red flowers shot up, and was a miracle. And I was left alone in that field, spurting blood for days and days, watering the flowers. And it was another miracle that my blood never stopped gushing until an angel came and put my head on again. But imagine, in the rush, he put it on backwards, and I could barely walk, and only backwards, which made me tired. And I walked backward and left that landscape and went back to Mexico. And I found myself in the backyard of my house, where there was so much sun and dust, and the whole patio was covered with big sheets just washed and left out to dry. And the maids came and shook the sheets, and they were like giant pieces of clouds. And the meadow was all green and covered with red flowers that my mama said were the color of the blood of the saint. And I began to laugh, and I told her that the saint was me. and how the Moors had martyred me. And she got angry and said, "Oh God, my little girl has lost her head." And it made me sad to hear those words. And I went to the punishment corner and bit my lips with anger because no one believed me. And when I was stuck to the wall, wishing that my mother and the maids were dead, the wall opened, and I was at the foot of a pepper tree that was next to a dry river. And there were big rocks that shined in the sun, and a lizard looked at me with its little head stretched out and suddenly ran to hide. And on the ground I saw again my body without my head. And my body was already scarred, and only a little blood trickled out, which made a little puddle in the dust. And it made me sad. And I frightened away the flies from the little puddle and threw some handfuls of dirt to hide it so the dogs wouldn't lick it. And then I began to look for my head, and it wasn't anywhere, and I couldn't even cry. And since there wasn't anybody in that place, I began to walk over an enormous yellow plain looking for my head until I found an adobe hut. And I met an Indian who lived there, and I asked for a little water for charity. And the old man told me that water is never denied a Christian. So he gave me water in a red jar. That was very cold, but I couldn't drink it because I didn't have a head. And the Indian said, "Don't worry, little girl, I have some spares right here." And he began to take his head collection out of some boxes he had by the door. But none of them fit me. Some were too big, some were too little. And I didn't like any. And after trying a lot, I got mad and started to kick the heads. And the Indian said, "Don't worry, little girl. Let's go to the village to cut off a head that will fit you." And I was very happy. And the Indian took a big axe for cutting wood from his house, and we began to walk. And after a long time, we came to a village. And in the square there was a girl who was being martyred, and some men dressed in black as though it was a burial. And one of them read a speech on the Cinco de Mayo day. And there were a lot of Mexican flags. And in the bandstand, they played a march, and it was like a fair. There were piles of peanuts and jicamas, and sugar cane, and coconuts, and watermelons. And everybody bought and sold stuff, except for a group that was listening to a man while the soldiers martyred the girl. And up there, through the opening, God saw everything. And the girl was very calm. And then the Indian snuck around, and when no one was looking, he cut off the girl's head and put it on me. And it fit very well. And I jumped for joy because the Indian was an angel. And everybody was looking at me and applauded. And I went skipping away. And when I was alone in the garden of my house, I became a little sad because I remembered the girl who had her head cut off. I hope she can cut one off another girl so she can have a head like me.
Wow. Oh.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Viva Mexico.